And now updates coming in from Indonesia of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is of course there for the G20 Summit. Prime Minister Modi meeting Xi Jinping. So the Chinese Premier and the Indian Prime Minister have met each other. They've also shaken hands. This is their first engagement since the 2020 Galwan Incident. This was the most anticipated meeting, remember, in the run-up to the G20 Summit. And now it has taken place. Remember, it's not a formal pull-aside. It's not a formal bilateral. But it is a meeting on the sidelines of the summit at the ceremonial dinner, which is underway right now. And you can see a very warm shaking of hands and exchange of pleasantries and greetings by Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, to Xi Jinping, Chinese Premier. To analyze it further, I have several guests joining us at this point. We are going to go straight across to Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, former diplomat first. Ambassador Sajanar, first, Xi Jinping met Biden yesterday in what was again another very, very important meetings. We'll analyze the other meetings that Prime Minister Modi has also had today in due course of this discussion. But your comment to this Modi-Xi meeting at the G20.
Thank you very much, Uday. I warmly welcome this meeting. There's, as you said very correctly, it is not a structured meeting. It's not a formal meeting. Because, when there are structured meetings, and particularly as far as leaders of India and China are concerned, you have to have month-long preparations and, lots of exchanges at senior officials, ministers, etc. You have to really prepare very hard for a meeting of this nature. But this is not a formal structured meeting. That having been said, I don't think anyone expected that a formal structured meeting would take place, because India has made this point very clearly that it cannot be business as usual till the time that you have 50,000 troops of China and 50,000 troops of India on either side of the line of actual control. We've been saying that, there should be status quo ante that should be restored. What existed in April 2020, there has been some progress that has been made, but still there are friction points, whether it is Demchok or Depsang. These are the two areas where there are still issues and problems. So it cannot be business as usual. When Wang Yi came to India in March of this year, I think this message was given very clearly. Also, when we had the Chinese ambassador on his farewell call to Dr. Jaishankar, I think this message was given also very clearly. That having been said, Uday, also it needs to be kept in mind that India is going to host the next meeting, is the president of G20. So I think some sort of civil relationship, both at the top level as well as at the functional level, has to be brought about. And while it might be uncomfortable, but I think this is something that you have to do in, both in international relations, diplomacy, your own policy, because, you cannot have that the two major leaders, top leaders of these two major powers, not really on, not to say on talking terms, but not even recognizing each other's presence. This is what had happened in Samarkand at the SCO summit on the 15th and 16th of September. The two leaders stood next to each other, but they did not even acknowledge each other's presence. But India is now going to host both the G20 as also the presidency, it has the presidency of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So I think it's in the fitness of things that this initial breaking of the ice, the thaw, has taken place, and after that we can sort of, at least start having normal functional relations when, we have about 200 meetings in 50 cities on different issues under the G20 presidency that are going to be held, and a large number of ministerial meetings taking place under G20 as also under SCO. So I applaud this initiative by Prime Minister Modi and very warmly welcome it. Thank you.
Okay, let me also at this point go straight across to our other guests as well with us. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, is also joining us live. Gautam Mukherjee, your first reaction to this Modi-Xi Jinping meeting. How do you look at this meeting? How do you view it? How should it be perceived? More importantly, by India, and then you can also analyze it for the rest of the world, who will also be viewing this meeting closely.
I don't think you can read much into it, Uday. I think, as Ambassador Sajanar pointed out today, as well as yesterday, because we are heading up the G20 as of December the 1st and are already heading up the SCO, to absolutely fail to recognize Xi Jinping would have been a little crass. And insofar as this is a dinner meeting and people are walking around between the leaders, talking to each other, exchanging pleasantries, I'm glad that Mr. Modi has made the effort. Beyond this, I don't even know if Xi will come to the various G20 meetings that will be held in India. Perhaps a delegation will come, like you have Lavrov heading up the Russian delegation at this particular G20. China's attempt to compartmentalize the conflict on the borders is not acceptable to India, and we cannot soften on that account. Having said that, what else is there that is in contention between the two countries? It is basically China's adamant and continuous hostility and predatoriness, attempts to grab territory, build upon it, then grab a little more, and carry on doing that all along the LAC in the Ladakh area, but that's not all there is to it. It's also at the Sikkim area. It's also at the Himachal Pradesh and the Uttarakhand areas, and in Arunachal Pradesh. These people won't stop. How can we be friends with them? We have to a certain extent, be diplomatic about it. I quite agree, though, that is more, I think, Prime Minister Modi's generosity than anything else, because as far as Xi is concerned, he is completely clear that he's going to carry on with his aggression. If you look at the body language of this meeting, there is no real warmth on Xi's part. Uday.
Okay, so that was Gautam's analysis of the body language of this meeting as well, which is very, very important, because at times when one is not privy to conversation, body language becomes supreme. Arvind Singh Tejawat, international affairs expert, also with us. Arvind, your first reaction, Modi finally meeting Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the G20 summit, at this dinner, pleasantries exchanged, your interpretation, your first reading.
Right. What I have impression by this meeting, I suppose that we are getting to gain nothing by the dialogue with China, because if we will not empower ourselves, then I suppose that such kind of meetings are useless. But at the same time, in international politics and in diplomacy, the continuous dialogue is needed, and that we are doing. So we are running on a right path. Professor Jagat Mehta, the earlier ambassador in China, he also express his ideas at various platforms that when we speak about the India-China relations, then definitely India shall try to understand the China's confusion about the India. So the first we have to make the China comfortable that India is not a threat for him. We are not a competitor. We shall move along in a favor of the people of both the countries. So such kind of confusion we shall try to erase. So, but yeah, of course, through the dialogue, we are not getting nothing. Even in a Galwan, we are still starving for the positive reactions from the China. So, but of course, what I believe that the dialogue is always good, and we shall try to use that platform, what we did earlier in Samarkand. So we shall try to do the same thing here in Bali. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let me also, in fact, quickly take this across to Our other guests are also with us. Dr. Ravi Godse, international affairs expert, is with us live. He's joining us from the USA. Dr. Godse, this meeting would have connotations broad as well. Your interpretation, it comes 24 hours after a much more structured meeting, of course, by Biden and Xi, but that was also keenly awaited, as that was also a first in many months.
Couple things. First is they are meeting in island of Bali, which in Sanskrit means sacrifice. US is trying to manufacture things somewhere. We are no longer going to manufacture things in China. So there are only two countries that can fill the goal, and that is India and Indonesia. So it is interesting that Indian and China heads of state or chiefs are meeting in Indonesia. Those three people will be competing for the manufacturing business. But though I'm here as an international expert, affairs expert, since I'm a doctor, let me strike a discordant note in all this bonhoming. Means, the Prime Minister of Cambodia met President Biden and he met Prime Minister Modi, and he has tested positive for COVID on Monday night. So the transmission starts 48 hours before. As a physician, my opinion was this mask and the rules could have gone away months ago, year ago. But it didn't happen for common people. Now, India did very well in vaccination. But none of the other world leaders.
Sir, we'll come to that in just a bit. This discussion is not about COVID protocols as yet.
No.
You
I'm
can
not talking about COVID.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about COVID protocol. I'm talking about these world leaders. They make the world follow their rules, but they don't seem to be following their own rules.
I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that. I want to specifically just talk about this meeting first at the start of the discussion. You can make your wider points later. Don McLean-Gill, let me get you in here. Don McLean-Gill, on how you are viewing this meeting. The fact is that this is the first time, it's not a structured meeting as I said earlier, but it's the first time that Modi and Xi, heads of state of India and China, are coming face to face, are meeting after that Galwan incident, which did sully our relationship over the course of the last couple of years.
Right. Thank you so much for the question. And yes, this particular event is not negative, but we must not really over-exaggerate the positivity of this particular informal meeting. What this really shows, and I agree with my distinguished co-panelists, is that India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, has shown that he is still willing to open lines of communication, despite the fact that China's assertiveness, its adventurism and expansion come at the expense of India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. But then again, being a responsible stakeholder of the regional rules-based order, we can see that Prime Minister Modi continues to open that line of dialogue. So this is something that we can call as maybe a strategic icebreaker. And as we can see, senior level officials between both India and China are continuously involved in communication and negotiation. But then again, this does not change the direction in which India is going, and that is to make sure that it doesn't get the short end of the bargain, particularly with China, as we are aware that China has been quite assertive in terms of its engagements with its neighbors, including India. So this does not really mean that India would be willing to, get relations to a sweet and rosy picture once again. But this is just to show that while we are monitoring and verifying every step that you are doing along the border, we are still open for communication in case that you wish to get back to the negotiating and discussion table. So this, I believe, is consistent, in fact, with India's positions in a number of international security issues, particularly like in Russia and Ukraine, where the Indian government is completely disagreeing with the notion that we should not cut off any forms of communication. And this is merely cementing that particular statement as well. But this is very proactive on our end in terms of India, and we will continue to monitor, of course, things that are going on the ground, which happens to really reflect China's assertiveness.
Absolutely, and it's quite interesting that this meeting also comes at a time, Ambassador Sajjanar, when India is taking over the presidency of G20 as well. And this is a G20 meeting next year in India that Xi Jinping will also be coming for, in all probability.
In all probability, yes, you're right, Uday, and that's what I mentioned. If the overhang of the G20 presidency had not been there as far as India is concerned, I'm sure there would have been not such a great concern that, both the leaders are not even, they don't nod at each other, they don't even exchange pleasantries and, are basically civil to each other because, when we are talking about dealing with the problems of the world, the challenges of the world, that that confront the globe as far as the economic challenges are concerned, and we know that it is the health, it is debt, it is climate change, it is food security, it's energy, etc. All these things. So if leaders of the second largest economy and the fifth largest economy in nominal terms, and India is the third largest economy in purchasing power parity terms, if these two leaders are not on, so to say, talking terms or even recognizing each other's presence, and they are also, when India is hosting the G20 presidency, then the possibility, the chances of successful outcome of the G20 in that sense gets considerably reduced because the same sentiments will be transferred down to the other functionaries, other officials, other ministers. And, as I mentioned, India is going to host about 200 meetings of the G20 over the coming year in different fora. There are large number of these bodies that have been constituted, whether it is the business B20s for businessmen of the 20 countries who will get together, the T20 is the think tanks, W20 is the women. So there are about 10, 11, 12 of them. And, it's really deals with the future of the world. It's not only the future of these two countries or the 20 countries, it's the future of 193 countries of the world. So I think if we are serious about our responsibility in terms of coming up with the solutions which are suitable solutions, appropriate solutions, then I think the countries have to work in an atmosphere, in an environment in which they can connect with each other, they can communicate with each other. And I take the point made by the last speaker that as far as our fundamental position on whether it's the border or the line of actual control or the, if I can use the word, the perfidy that has been exercised by China in terms of, destroying all the agreements that had been signed between the two countries from 1993 onwards, the perfidy perpetrated by China. So I think those views are not going to change anytime in a hurry. I think China will have to move forward significantly. As you would have seen just 2 days ago, the army chief also said that there is a huge difference between what China says and what China does. And we really have to see what China is doing on the ground. And we have to be very careful as far as this is concerned. So I think this message has come out loud and clear as far as India is concerned. India is not going to forget this experience as it goes forward, as far as both the G20 and the SCO presidencies are concerned. But I think this is a welcome step in terms of at least exchanging pleasantries and, as I said, lessening the temperatures a little bit so that relations can be cooled down somewhat, and at least at the official level there can be a discourse which would be to the benefit of everyone concerned. Uday.
Okay, let me also, in fact, quickly at this point bring back in Gautam Mukherjee. Gautam Mukherjee, now this meeting coming, of course, at the cusp of India's presidency of the G20. Would you also link the two? Also, the fact that obviously India has made it pretty clear that till they do not change the situation on ground, there will be no structured talks, no going back to the way things were earlier.
Well, as I said before, Uday, that if India softens its stance to save a conference, G20, even its 50 or 200 meetings, I think China would have won diplomatically as well. And I don't think we can afford to do that. I think we have presented ourselves as the challenger with the state of the Chinese economy the way it is, the hostilities it is facing economically from the United States and at least substantial parts of Europe, the NATO alliance. Even Germany made the statement that after Scholz went to visit Xi in Beijing, he said, well, Asia is not just China. So I think he's also edging away a little bit. And I think he was the last bastion for the Chinese over there. We have presented ourselves as the challenger. We are growing at 7% odd. China is not even holding on to 3%, however big their economy is. 3% is not sustainable for China. We want to be considered more often than not as a location for the new supply chain. And in all of this, this is hostile to China's ambitions, intentions, and so it can't be brushed away. It cannot be papered over. And I think we will have to bite the bullet. Politeness in political fora is always a good thing. But in real terms, if we analyze our situation and we analyze China's detrimental consequences from India's rise, there is no common ground possible. And if people are going to line up to the left and right of this, then so be it. India's on the rise. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet and take the consequences. And in any case, we are fairly determined that we will not be bullied militarily. And as far as economy goes, we are now doing well enough to take our chances for the big table. I do believe that India will be invited into the G7. It may be called the G8 or the G9. They might call one or two people, including India. And so it won't just be the G20 leadership or the SCO leadership coming up. We're about to join the Rich Boys Club. It is coming up, and it will happen, in my opinion, a lot sooner than membership of the UNSC, which is dominated by 5 people with unilateral vetoes. So I don't know when we'll get into the UNSC, but the G7, which will probably be a majority action, we will soon be there.
Let me bring in Dr. Ravi Godse on his take on the day one episodes, meetings, interventions, and takeaways. Dr. Ravi Godse.
Before I do that, let me quickly go back to China. It is said that the leaders of the nations tried diplomacy after they have exhausted all the other options. So means, on the face, as you said, they are going to be China was very smiling and friendly to us from 1955 to 1962, till they suddenly attacked us in October 1962. So I think China only understands one language, and that is of strength. And I think we are both United States, and I think looking at this meeting, how this is panning out, I keep saying that I'm Indian origin person who's now settled in USA. I have a huge practice I deal with a lot of regular American folk. Everybody has very fond view of India. India is English speaking, it is democratic, it is friendly. So US would like to do way more business with India. And the nature of the modern business is when you are getting business, you are taking it away from somebody. So that is the problem, what is going on currently, like vis-a-vis our relationship with China. And regarding these world meetings, who's going to be rude to each other on the face? But the problem is, if you are, even when you know it is all for pretense, if you can be polite to each other, then you know how deep and the underlying problems are. Interestingly, before the invent of social media, Jimmy Carter had visited India in late 70s, and something happened. He was really upset, and he didn't realize the mic was open. And he said fairly interesting things about how India had received him, and then he realized that the mic was open. Luckily for him, there was no Facebook or WhatsApp, otherwise he would have been like, his reputation would have been destroyed in India. So I think the meetings are going well, but you know, at the end of the day, it is the meeting that didn't happen. In the sense, Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping should have met formally. They both should have taken time to do that. Occasionally, China is very heavy on that. When Dalai Lama was given refuge in India, and Dalai Lama was in Washington, D.C. one, it is rumored in diplomatic circles, whether the ambassadors can correct me, China took a strong position saying that US president cannot receive him. So he was in Washington, D.C. in a White House room, and US president was just passing by, and he said, "Hey, Dalai Lama, what are you doing here?" And they talked to each other. That is rumored in diplomatic circles. I don't know whether it was true. So rather than PM Modi and Xi Jinping just meeting on the sidelines, I think they should definitely have found time. At least, you know, size up your enemy.
Okay. So you believe a structured dialogue should have happened. Do you agree, Ambassador Sajjanar? Why don't I get a quick response from you before I get in Don McLean-Gill for an overall perspective? Since Dr. Ravi has raked up China again, Ambassador Sajjanar, quick response, and then I'll get in Don McLean.
No, I don't think it was on the cards at all.
Yes.
You know, right at the beginning, I said that meetings like this need a lot of preparation, month-long preparation. You know, ministers travel from one to the other. They look at agendas. They look at what they're going to be talking about. So, you know, it is not a question of time that they did not have the time. You know, meaning it's such an important relationship. If I say that today, you know, India's relationship with America is the most critical, is the most consequential in positive ways. In a similar way, I think on the other side, India's relationship with China is the most challenging one. And we have to, you know, whether it is in the area of defense on our borders, or, you know, the string of pearls around us, or entry of the Chinese ships in the Indian Ocean, etc., its expansionist policy. So there are huge lots of them. So it's not a question of time that, you know, they should have found time. But it is the sort of circumstances that we are in, the manner in which China has conducted itself. You know, Xi Jinping came to Mamallapuram in October 2019. And you know what, Bonhomie, etc. And we have been maintaining our relations between the two countries on the basis of agreements signed in 1993, 96, 2005, 2012, 2013. And in one fell stroke, China sort of, you know, just put all these agreements to the side and brought in its troops there. You know, something similar but more obnoxious than what it had done in Doklam in 2017. So I don't think a meeting was on the cards, and I have been very supportive that there should not have been any formal or structured meeting. But also on one of the channels in the morning, I had mentioned this very clearly, that if there are exchange of pleasantries on the sidelines, you know, when they are, because even that did not take place in Samarkand, Uday. If you remember the body language, both the leaders are standing next to each other, but they are not sort of, you know, looking at each other, or they're not acknowledging each other. So here what I had said is that at least exchange of pleasantries. So there is a thaw, there is a listening of the cold vibes between the two of them. And I'm very happy to see that that is exactly what has happened. And that is why right at the beginning, I said I warmly welcome and applaud this move and initiative by Prime Minister Modi. Uday.
Yes, okay. Let me bring in Don McLean-Gill now for overall how day one has panned out, the G20 Summit. How do you react to how the first day has panned out? This is obviously an important summit. Overarching themes, of course, of recovery post-COVID, but there is, of course, a shadow of Russia, Ukraine, and also the Chinese aggression over the meeting, isn't it?
Right. Thank you so much for the question. Very timely indeed. You have to understand the G20 is significant 80% of global economic output, 75% of exports, 60% of the world's population. But the meeting comes at a time when a series of geopolitical shifts have erupted the regional political landscape. And what happens is that this actually showed the variations and the dynamicism of the members of the G20. So it's not homogeneous. In fact, there are several counter narratives for particular issues. When we look into trade, for example, while the need to maintain a rules-based principle for the WTO is seen to be significant. But we could see that because of the major power competitions, even these principles are being compromised. And on top of that, with the Western Bloc, for example, applying more pressure on the Eastern Bloc to be more strident and more stern with Russia, particularly against the situation in Ukraine, we could see that countries in the East, the developing world, are advocating for a more proactive, practical stance that, we do not need to add more fuel to the fire at the expense of our development and security. Rather, we have to look into things proactively. And these are the variations that we can see, in fact. And the last point I'd like to make is that the G20, perhaps the most interesting parts are what happens in the sidelines, the bilaterals. I think that takes the cake in terms of understanding the significance of the G20 beyond the whole institutional setup. So what happens in between is really something of great interest.
Yes. Dr. Godse, I know your hand is up, but I have to move beyond these points now. You've made pretty irrelevant points on today's discussion, I must say. You spoke about COVID protocols when I asked you about Modi-Xi. Now when we are talking about overall G20, you're going back to Modi-Xi, saying a meeting should have happened, whereas the bulk of our panel and country believes it shouldn't have, obviously, looking at what China has been doing in Galwan. But coming back to, Gautam Mukherjee at this point, because of the presidency. The presidency is very, very important for India, isn't it? And I think formally it's going to get handed over to us tomorrow. So while day one has been very successful, day two is also going to be very, very exciting, Gautam Mukherjee, isn't it?
Well, Modi has received center stage generosity from almost all the participants, with the exception of China. And China can't help it. We are the new gun in the West, and they don't know what to do about us. And it is an existential crisis for them, and we're on the rise and they're on the decline. What to do? Now, that being the case, I don't think we're going to have any difficulties, because India is not out to dominate and abuse anybody's trust. We are there to cooperate and derive mutual benefit from it. And this is what Prime Minister Modi has been saying. He has been very, very clear and very proudly stated all the different areas in which we have made stupendous progress, and the scale of our operations in India is unparalleled anywhere in the world. You go to China, into the interior, the people are poor and miserable. You need a pass to work in Shanghai. We know the whole business. We've seen it before in South Africa. And China may be rich, but it does not carry its people with it. India does, to the extent possible, to the maximum extent possible. And the whole world, particularly the developing world, looks forward to that. We are no longer Gandhian, nor are we, non-aligned, hostile to the West, but we are here to help people both in the West and in the developing countries. All they have to do is reach out, and we'll be there. And Modi, in his 8 years, has traveled the world more extensively than any other prime minister, and willy-nilly, so have all our external affairs ministers. They've been around more times and to more countries than ever before. India's profile has been raised in a very positive way, and we have no enemies. We have one and a half. The one is China, and the half, or shall I call it 10%, I don't know what, is Pakistan. As for the rest, we get on with everyone. Uday.
Okay. Yes, Arvind Singh Tejawat, respond to that because obviously, day 2 is extremely important. We also perhaps might see some polar sides tomorrow. Today, of course, Prime Minister Modi fitted in that Indian diaspora program, in the afternoon, in the middle of the day as well.
Yeah.
But tomorrow there might be some other polar sides too, isn't it, Arvind? Yes. Oh, okay. Gautam wants to quickly talk on the Indian diaspora program because that was also very important. We got you briefly on that, but you want to expand on your point, Gautam, on the diaspora program, which
Well,
Prime Minister Modi also
I
always
thought-
fits in. He makes it a point to always fit in, despite his very busy schedule. Then I'll go to Arvind. Gautam.
Mr. Modi knows that if he shakes a person's hand outside his hotel, or he stops to talk to someone in a corridor, it goes all over the world nowadays. That's the way it is. The multiplier effect of any speech is profound. And when you talk to the diaspora, they are rallying with you all the way. Jai Shri Ram, Jai Bharat Mata ki Jai. That's what's happening. But he used that opportunity like a stump speech. It was almost like an election speech. But this was not an election speech aimed at India or winning a state or even winning the general elections. This was a stump speech to gain our rightful place in the world. There are many people in many countries who do not know the extent of the progress we have made in so many different directions. And he made that apparent. If you are an NRI or a person of Indian origin living anywhere else in the world, your breast swells with pride. But it isn't just a matter of patriotic pride or nostalgia for the country that you came from. It is facts and figures till they're coming out of your ears. And that is what Modi did today at this diaspora meeting. Uday.
Yes, indeed. Arvind Singh Tejawat, go ahead now.
Yeah, Udayji, by interacting with the Indian origin people there in Indonesia and the Indian diaspora,
Sound problems.
Modi Saab is willing to prove that the India's presence in all over the world is not from today, it's from the centuries. So that the India's importance wanted to proven by
Can we cut live to Arvind? I can see him speaking. Arvind, your audio is very faint though. Perhaps you need to just speak up a bit.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Better. Just speak up a bit louder, please.
Okay, right. So I suppose I'm audible now.
Yes, better.
So
yeah.
right, I'm saying that by interacting with the Indian origin people there
Can our producers
Indonesia,
please cut to Arvind's frame? Please cut to Arvind's frame. Thank you. Yes, Arvind, go ahead.
Okay, right. So I'm saying that by interacting with the Indian origin people there in Indonesia, I suppose Modi Saab is willing to prove that the India's presence in all over the world is not from today, it's from the centuries. So that the diplomatic message we are willing to send to all over the world. At the same time, I suppose the G20 is an economic forum, and the Indian diplomacy should concentrate on the economic interest only, especially the energy and the food security related issues. And since most of the countries were the part of the non-alignment movement, so India is a obvious leader of that countries. And at the same time, I would like to say that the SU is a platform where the Russia and the China dominates. At the same time, the Quad is the platform where the Euro-American countries, they do dominate. So the G20 group is where the countries from both the sides, they comes together. So India can use this platform because India is having its own interest with both the blocks from the Eastern and the Western blocks. So I suppose the India can use this platform but to serve its own purpose and to secure the national interest. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Also, of course, the world is looking now at how the G20 meeting, the outcomes of the G20 meeting, Dr. Ravi Godse, will be carried forward. It shouldn't just be about deliberations over 48 hours, but it needs to move beyond this, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And means, I'm taking it in the spirit of debate, my point being called irrelevant. But the whole point is the G20 meeting shouldn't have happened per China's and Japan's laws. Their quarantine laws are straight. This meeting should not have happened. I'm just saying it, right?
Okay.
You just monitor it.
Monitor
the world news. And the second thing I would say.
Now you're being more of a physician than a foreign affairs analyst. But it's okay. It's okay. On a lighter vein, it's fine.
Let me say as an international affair, if you Google US news, the entire US news was about Biden and Xi Jinping meeting. There was not one mention. So if we don't have to be irrelevant, like the comments, we have to be assertive. I completely disagree that these meetings take months to prepare. We have to get over this bureaucratic mindset that the British left us. If British Prime Minister and US President had set up a meeting with 6 months of preparation.
Dr. Ravi, you've made that point earlier. That's why I got a response from Ambassador Sajanar, who had a contrarian view. Now I'm talking about the overall G20 summit. So let's come back to that, sir. Let's come back to that.
Sure.
What you believe has been the outcome of the first day, what you believe should be achieved tomorrow, and how we can take all of this forward.
I think, I'm sorry, I was a little out of line. But what I'm saying is now India needs to act its place now. It has edged out Britain in GDP. So means, we have to believe as if we own the earth, in the sense like we have to act our place. So we have to be accorded the respect that is due to us. Means ABC, let me not go there. But in terms of trade, I think if we are trading with each other, we are not shooting at each other, like it was said. So I think trade is always a very good place to start. And like I have been saying, that India is the perfect partner for all the Western democracies because of the strength of our democracy, our freedom of speech. And frankly, people, I don't want to take credit for myself, but people like me, means when 5 to 10 Indians come together, amongst themselves, they always say some interesting things about India. But to any outsider, they are always ambassadors. Each and every one of us is an ambassador to India. So I think because of the Indian diaspora presence and how Indian government is sort of cultivating that diaspora and strengthening the relationship, I think India's world trade position is going to be very good.
Okay. Don McLean-Gill, with this Indian presidency now also all set to begin, how is the world looking at this? Give us the world perspective on this. Since you're joining us from abroad, give us the world perspective on what they are hoping to be achieved through this Indian presidency of the G20.
Right, thank you very much. And I absolutely agree with the statements of Mr. Mukherjee regarding the level of diaspora engagement. If I could just really briefly add, I was born and raised in the Philippines, but I am of Indian origin as well. And I could see the shift of public opinion towards India from 2 decades ago to what we are seeing now, particularly in the past few years. And from a government point of view, at the state level, there is more of a welcoming position towards India's role as a leader, as a security provider, and a responsible developmental partner. And looking at it from public opinion, looking at it from the sub-state level, there's a lot of positive remarks from the public towards India's role as a partner as well. People-to-people ties are also increasing. Now, going back to your question, sir, regarding the G20, the vision of India as with one Earth, one family, and one future is in fact more practical than it is ideal, contrary to the comments of others. Such a concept centers on bringing diverse states together through an inclusive framework that capitalizes on diversity, rejects attempts to impose rigid approaches to achieve narrowly defined goals. Hence, cooperation must be based on mutual interests and concerns, not narrowly defined ambitions. And the way India has demonstrated its political maturity with the situation in Ukraine, with other situations around the world. The developing world, particularly in Asia, are strengthening their outlook towards India, and this is very welcoming. ASEAN, we're looking at the members, we're looking at West Asia, Central Asia. The centrality of India in their strategic discourses has only increased. And this is very good. And if we continue to play our cards right, then we're on our way towards that level of leadership as well in the long term.
Yes, no doubt. Okay, I'll leave the last word with Ambassador Sajjanhar. Closing comment.
Closing comments, Uday, I think it's been a very rich discussion, and taking on from what Mr. Gill has said, I think what has impressed the world also is the manner in which India has conducted itself, particularly over the last 3 years, maybe more over the last 8 years, but specifically over the last 3 years, in terms of dealing with the health issues after the COVID-19 pandemic that struck and debilitated the whole world. And at that time, it was said that, India is going to be really, its health structure will crumble and we'll have such a large number of casualties. But I think India has surprised its worst critics and people in India itself by handling this whole pandemic so very well, handling the economic situation so very well. More than 800 million people are being provided food for the last 33 months or so. And so, while there are shortages of food and energy everywhere, I think we've been able to keep our inflation also low as a result of this. So I think this is what has impressed the world very much. And so I agree with the panelists who say that the world looks forward to a very successful leadership by India as the president of G20 next year. Thank you, Uday.
Okay, well, let's leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.